This is Opportunities in LandSpeed Racing, part of the PRI trade show. And we have a real special panel here today, and it's really my honor, and it's really special for us to be able to welcome these folks to the stage. And we're going to have some fun here today, and it's not going to be terribly formal. We're going to have some conversation with our panelists, and I've got some questions, and I'm sure you guys do too. So we'll go through some of my stuff, and then we'll have you guys, raise your hand and ask our panelists anything within reason that you'd like. So, without further delay, I will introduce our panelists, starting to my right with LandSpeed Louise Ann Noeth, Thank you. Established LandSpeed Productions in 1984. Is that about right? Definitely one of the world's foremost authorities on land speed racing. She's been published around the world.
That's one.
So Louise has been published around the world. Her writings appeared in New York Times, Sports Illustrated, and of course, PRI Magazine. We're really honored to have Louise on our panel today. Moving along, we've got Stuart Gosswein right next to her with SEMA. Stuart is SEMA's Senior Director of Federal Government Affairs, also a big land speed guy. He was the Bonneville 200-mile-an-hour Club Man of the Year in 2013. And he's also a primary contact for the Save the Salt Coalition. So we're honored to have Stuart joining us today. Next to him is Tom Burkland, who we realized yesterday is, in fact, the fastest man at the PRI trade show.
Yes.
So we do have him with us. We're honored to have Tom. He's a former aerospace engineer with the Air Force, one-time world land speed record holder for piston-driven vehicles. I think Tom's exploits are very well known, and we're just honored to have him joining us today. So thank you, Tom. On the end is Steve Watt of Maxwell Industries. Steve started building, he got into racing in 1977, I think, somewhere in that time.
More like 68.
Okay.
To my first race.
A little bit earlier than that. But got involved, I believe, this with Kenny Duttweiler. Is that about right?
Kenny Duttweiler on Maine.
Okay.
With the flat. Let's see, the flat fire was the first thing I worked on.
Yeah. I mean, so Steve has really done it all. I mean, his company, he builds sprint cars and all kinds of vehicles, but I think probably best well known for work on the Speed Demon.
Yes. By far.
What's that?
By far.
Yeah. So world's fastest piston engine car. Definitely very honored to have Steve with us today. So that's our panel, and I wanted to get started, and we've got these wonderful panelists, and I want to start to my right here with Louise, and we've had a lot of conversations about land speed racing, and I just want you to paint the picture and describe land speed racing. Obviously, we've got a lot of racers here in the audience and a lot of folks in this, but give me the picture of land speed racing and why it's so special.
All right, before I get started, though, I want to raise a hand. How many have never been to Bonneville? Sitting down. Okay, all you folks, you didn't know this when you got out of bed today, but y'all are virgins. You are virgins all over again. So when you come to Bonneville, you will have a virginal experience. And I think for those of you that have been there, you might agree with me, your first time at Bonneville was one of those virginal experiences. Anybody disagree that's been to Bonneville?
Nope.
Good, I don't have to see you later in the back. So, Bonneville, the reason I got involved with this is a long, circuitous route, so we won't bother with that. But when I did show up for the first time and the people that I met there, it was more the place. I was astonished. I'd gotten there early because I wanted to meet the people putting this together, because I'd heard since 1949 it was all volunteer. How do all of these raging motorsport personalities last for 50 years? Because my first time out there was in 1997, the 50th anniversary. How do you boys and girls mainly boys, get together and not kill each other over 50 years? Well, I found out. Because there's an esprit de corps out there that happens in this place, and I think there's a sense of reverence at Bonneville that when you go there, it is a ground zero of motorsports. If you don't get up in the morning and you don't see the sun come up over the mountains, you have missed something. You have missed a part of life. There is a sense of wonder. There is a sense of making you small and making you not so big in your pants. In learning what you can do, and you understand I really have to focus on whatever it is your program is. I don't care if you're building a single cylinder speedway bike that you're going to adapt to Bonneville, or one of his twin engine behemoth creamsicle and white demon, or his creamsicle colored demon.
Good choice, by the way.
Yeah, there you go. It doesn't make any difference. That's what I found out. The folks that went the fastest, 400 miles an hour plus, opposed to the folks that were struggling to get to 3 digits, there was no difference in them. Their joy came in the great amounts, as did their anger, as did their sadness. And they helped each other. And I'd never seen this in any other form of motorsports. So I think that's what LandSpeed racing gives. And yeah, I hear the same thing from other forms of motorsport, but there's money there. And there's no money at Bonneville. The money at Bonneville is in your heart, and it's this little, it's a piece of paper that's smaller than this. And it tells you whether your good idea, your nobody idea, makes you a somebody just that day, and not to anybody but yourself. Was that good idea something that worked or didn't work? And that time slip tells you that. It also stops all the arguments, because when you come back with that time slip, the argument's over. Either you've done well or you haven't. If you're happy, you will smile with your friends. If you're not happy, your head is down, you are in with the tools, in with the car, and something is going to change for the next run. So it's a lot of fun. Maybe that's enough, and
I
we
think
should
that would,
get
yeah.
down to the rest of the guys that actually do it. Those are just my observations, but it's what kept me coming back, because there was no money, there was no backbiting. There was this true rawness of motorsport. There was this great American can-do attitude. What LandSpeed racers do on the ground, I saw the astronauts do and when they went to the moon. And that's what I put those guys on and the gals in the same level as the space program in the 60s.
Thanks. So, Steve, building on that a little bit, I want to get your thoughts on how did you get involved, and how did you catch the bug? And
Well, I first built some headers for Ron Main for the flat fire, and he begged me to go to Bonneville. I'm like, well, wait a minute, Knoxville's this week. I can't go there. So then a year went by.
Notice he said made him go to Bonneville.
Yeah,
the first
so
time.
the second time, George was going to run the flat Echo Fire for the first time, and Duttweiler had done the motor, and we do all the headers, intercoolers. We get the car there and make the car run, get it ready to go, and goes in the trailer, and they go to Bonneville, and I was headed to Knoxville, and he's like, wait, why can't you go? So I took my wife with me, and we went to Bonneville, and I drove up my pickup, and I was watching, and it's like, it took these guys all day to change a motor. I mean, they're wasting time. So I said, we got home, I said, and George set a FIA record, and that was cool, and the first thing I ever worked on, it went over 350 miles an hour, so I'm kind of jaded that way. I didn't, like, start at the bottom.
yeah, it's like going to Vegas and winning off the bat.
Yeah, it's, so the next year, the car shows up at my shop, and he says, okay, this is gonna be the Speed Demon. We're putting a Mopar 4-cylinder in it, and you're gonna do all the work. So I had a couple of guys working for me, and we tore into it and got it all done, got the body at the last minute, like always, and got it to Bonneville and blew up every single 4-cylinder Duttweiler had made. We had to make the pans, the intake manifold. There was no parts for a Mopar Hemi or a W9 at the time. So we made everything and went to Bonneville and proceeded to wreck everything we owned. And that was what we did.
Yeah.
So from then until now, there's 3 or 4 guys that worked on that car every year.
Yeah.
And we'd take it to Bonneville and thrash. And finally we started to get a handle on the program. And Duttweiler, he's pretty much a genius. He's,
They don't wreck everything all the time now.
yeah, we're pretty good. We're past that. Now if we can't run 4 or 5 times a day, we're a little upset.
Yeah,
We can switch a motor now in less than an hour, so.
yeah, that's pretty impressive. Hey, Tom, talk to me about how you got into it. Where was your entree?
Well, my first trip was actually in 1969, so I've been doing it a long time.
Yeah.
My parents were involved in it prior to that. It's kind of been our family activity that we've done together. I see a lot of good friends out there that have been involved with it, and we've traded parts back and forth and information, and in fact, a lot of the tire equipment that's being used out there today came directly out of the Mickey Thompson development program that we built all the testing stuff to be able to develop the tires that we use. Without that, there probably wouldn't be LandSpeed racing today, because virtually everybody that's run there in the last 10 years has had a set of those tires on one end or the other of their car. And it's, as has been mentioned, it's the last real amateur motorsports activity that there is in the world. That there isn't anything else that you can do that you choose how you want to do it and at what level you want to do it. Some of us get in probably a little deeper over our head than we should. Obviously, these streamliner projects like Steve and I are talking about, they consume you pretty quickly with the development, all the spare parts and the support equipment and all that you have to have. And I mean, they may be backyard efforts in that we don't take home a paycheck when we're done, but there's an awful lot of very professional things that are done to be able to make them work. You've got, you know, the engine dyno work that Kenny's doing to be able to make all of that stuff happen, and I don't know that anybody's doing it without some significant amount of aerodynamic effort when you get up into those speed ranges. If they are, they really should rethink it. But in the end, we all still go down the same racetrack that everybody else does. I mean, I've, over the last few years, participated in the motorcycle event, originally the BUB event that's become Bonneville Motorcycle Speed Trials. One of the neatest things that we've done there is a gentleman from Alabama by the name of Dan Parker. Okay, he's blind. He's a former dragster pro mod racer. He crashed and can't see. He built a 50cc tricycle with a guidance system on it that works off a GPS that puts tones in his ears to tell him which way to go on the track, and he came and wanted to race. Okay, he can't see the track. So how do you set this up? As a sanctioning body, how do you deal with something like that? So we went out there after the event was over one day, put him on the track and practiced with it to prove that he could go down the track and not hit anything. And he went 59 miles an hour. And do you think anybody was happier than Dan Parker that day? So that's the kind of thing that happens here. And you don't see that anywhere else. I mean, if he came to Indianapolis and tried to go around that 2.5 mile oval, what success would he have? None. They wouldn't even let him in the place. So. And each of you out there that are wearing those red hats probably had an experience like that. And you've all got a place to start, and you were welcomed by the community when you came. And I think that's one of the neat things about the whole deal.
Yeah. Stuart, what about you? Do you find that same sort of camaraderie and that same sort of atmosphere among the competitors of everybody sort of included, and it's like a big club kind of thing?
Absolutely. And I'm an example of the enthusiast. I'm not a racer. But the first time I went to Bonneville was in '72. I grew up in Chicago, and we went across the country towing trailers and stuff. And so we stopped at the rest area, and I was so excited to be seeing the Bonneville Salt Flats. And then years later, I find out that I'm looking at the Salduro Loop and not where they're actually racing. And so in '77, I ended up moving to Washington, D.C. What does that have to do with Bonneville? I'm the example of somebody who's engaged in government affairs. And so the government obviously has a lot to do in terms of what's happening at Bonneville. And so I'm your connection to being able to go into the BLM in Washington, D.C., or going to all the lawmakers that eventually have control over Bonneville.
And we're glad he does it.
Yes.
Exactly. Steve, I wanted to ask you a little bit because, you obviously came from, from the sprint cars and that kind of thing. And what would it take, or what did it take for you and for those of, in the audience who aren't as initiated into the LandSpeed world, but to transition from that world to this one? What is that like? I mean, how different are they?
It's not really too bad. Like, we had to build a new speed demon last year, and we did it in 35 weeks. Yeah. And I was here at the show. Georgia got a hold of me in November. So I came here, talked to all the vendors, which are pretty much the same vendors I use every week. Talked to some friends, asked if they were in. Kenny Colesback has a carbon fiber company. He's gonna do the body. Danny Dryden, a good friend of mine right here in Indy, brought him out to do the canopy and do some special projects. And I just dug deep into the depth I already had. And every single one of them was ready to go. Whatever you need, I know you gotta do it fast. I know you guys are on a time crunch. So when I left the trade show, I had a whole lot better feeling of being done by August. So as we went along, I mean, the vendors we use, a lot of them are some pro stock, like Mark Williams, for instance. I mean, FK Rod Ends, Brown and Miller, all of them stepped up, said, hey, what do you need? What are you gonna do? I know you're changing stuff. What do you need? And they were all on board to help with whatever we needed, so.
Yeah, I want to jump in about that. For the folks that haven't been out to Bonneville, and if you're manufacturers out there, a lot of the products that you already make and/or the services you provide, they will work and will be needed and used by the LandSpeed racing community. But I caution you, before you think you've got the latest thing since sliced bread, you go get yourself a rule book. Because remember, while this is LandSpeed racing long distance, it essentially is a very long drag race. And the safety requirements and the technical aspects are a little more stringent because there isn't an Indy car out there that goes 400 miles an hour, thank you very much. And while drag racing goes 300, Tommy goes 400 on a regular basis. And George, he went over 412 times in one season and never hurt himself with that car. So I would counsel you to take a look at the sport, go to Bonneville, go to at least the dry lakes, take a look at what goes on out there, and then look at your program, look at your products, your services, and adapt from that point. But don't think that you can come into the LandSpeed racing community and say, hey, I've got the greatest thing here. You really need to understand, while it looks simple, and anybody out there who thinks it's easy to drive in a straight line fast, I got a news flash for you. Go and take a look and you'll learn. A few conversations and a few pits will make a big difference. Once you do that though, you will understand that type of camaraderie and the welcoming, and they'll help you because they'll tell you what they need.
Hey, Tom, I want to talk about that because we got into that a little bit on the floor yesterday, and we were talking about some of the equipment that they use and some of the engines that you find in these LandSpeed, and you said some of them are the same kinds of engines or same types of power plants that you find in some of the more traditional racing venues.
In the traditional LandSpeed operation, most of this stuff was custom developed.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a lot of drag racing technology used in the blown fuel side of it. But as you get into some of the lower classes, recently we've seen a big influx of surplus or obsolete NASCAR power plants coming into specifically the C-Class arena. There's a lot of them being used. And they're very inexpensive horsepower per dollar at that point because you take advantage of all the development that's gone on in the circuit racing world. You get into something like Steve's working with, of course, that's a custom build engine now because you're in a class area where there is nothing else available. The same with a lot of the drivetrain pieces. I mean, we started out using the Liberty 5-speed clutchless gearbox. They amplified it and stuck two of them together to be able to make a 7-speed out of it because they need more gear ratio and less split in it. That 7-speed Liberty is probably only used in LandSpeed racing. I don't think I've seen one anywhere else, partly because they're fairly expensive, but nobody else really needs the gear range that you use to try to get a almost standing start car from that point to 470 miles an hour in 5 miles. So there's some very custom pieces when you talk about final drives. I mean, we talk about ratios. My car runs a 1-to-1 ring and pinion in it. Nobody in the oval track world's ever even heard that before. And then of course you got some torque capacity numbers here that are really big compared to that, unless you're talking about top fuel dragster stuff. So there's some very specialized components used in the faster cars. But there's also a lot of the stuff that you see out here on the floor in this show that can be adapted and made to work there. So I think, as Louise points out, if you understand the application and how the vehicles are going to be used and how the parts are going to be used by the teams, there's a lot of the standard equipment that's being built in the aftermarket industry that's usable. And there's also some opportunities for some custom stuff that in today's CNC manufacturing world can easily be built there. So you don't necessarily have to spend a whole lot of money as a manufacturer to be able to build a dedicated LandSpeed part if you've already got a good oval track component there.
Yeah, Louise, I saw you scribbling. Are you in agreement with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Matter of fact, when I did the story in the June issue of PRI, one of the things that when I was talking to a number of the folks, just generally to get a little background, I found that there was a tremendous amount of crossover where they were saying, hey, I didn't realize that these parts would work that way. And the reason they thought that they wouldn't work is they thought it was a completely different type of sport. And I said in the defining moment, and I'll say it again, if you haven't been there, you can't make any decisions whatsoever. It's kind of like judging a book that you've not read.
Yes, exactly. Now,
Yeah.
like Tom was speaking, like, the last time Tom was there was like 2008 when they ran their car.
Yeah.
The first time I went was 2006, so the first time we ran that I was involved was 2007. So what we learned that I took for granted, that I had no clue about spinning the tires, I mean, that's just, hey, whatever, do it. I don't know what you're talking about. So the evolution of it is, you gotta think, before Tom, there was guys that learned stuff, then
Yes.
Tom learned stuff, and then we catch on and we learn stuff.
Yeah.
And now we're gonna go for however long we go, and then the guys that come in behind us.
Yeah.
I mean, we documented the build of the Speed Demon. I mean, it's been all over Facebook, there's videos. We HD videoed the whole car from day one till it's finished. So we have everything videoed of the whole car. So
What does that do for you? I mean, as a promotional tool or as a way to...
I just thought it was cool.
Yeah.
I mean,
So-
it don't matter, it's not like you're gonna make $1 million doing it. I mean, you just kind of, it's like we had the ability to do it, so we did it, and George was pretty adamant. I mean, when you work for George Poteet, he's a different fella. He is the most generous man you'll ever meet in your life. And he wanted to document this build, and then he wants to go run the car, and he says, we don't want to do nothing until after we run it. We want to make sure it goes as fast as the other one and all that. But he was real adamant about documenting everything so everybody could see how it was done, what was involved, the people involved, the people that help us. See, he doesn't let us really we can't get anything for free.
Yeah.
He insists on paying for everything. So with that said, in the industry, it really helps the industry because we spend a lot of money in 35 weeks. I'll tell you
And
that
there's
right now.
not speed secrets. You can go online, you can see all about this. If you would like to challenge George Poteet and Steve Watt, bring it on. And that's the nice part about it. The trick is, it's not easy, even if you've got the parts and lots of money. Because there's been plenty of money come to Bonneville. A lot of the OEMs have come to Bonneville. Oh, we're the OEM, we can do this, blah, blah, blah. And they went home. And and I kind of laughed the engineers right onto the trailers because they came with an attitude. Don't come with an attitude. Come with a, gee whiz, would you help me with this? And you'll be amazed on how many hands you get to help you.
So when we talk about, putting it on YouTube and promoting it, and it's definitely cool, no question about that. Stuart, from your vantage point, and obviously, saving the salt is a huge, part of what you do. How do you see the next generation of racers? Are they embraced? Is there a next generation of LandSpeed racers? Is the enthusiast community, rising up, and is this capturing their imagination? I mean, do you see the next wave coming?
Absolutely. And so that's one of the exciting things is that, as everybody on the panel is saying, you just go from one generation to another and you're sharing the information so that others can benefit from that. And so there's always going to be that youth aspect, and somebody, it's going to catch their eye, want to go to Bonneville, and then they dig in and they try and tap into that collective knowledge.
Yeah. Speaking of the youth aspect, Tom, I'm going to put you on the spot here for a second again, too. We had a nice chat yesterday, and you mentioned a pretty neat experience where I think it was a grandson of an associate or somebody that you knew, and you want to recount that for everyone here? I thought that was pretty.
It's kind of a good example of the way information, parts, and tools get shared in this whole business. Many of you remember Nolan White, his son Rick, that ran the auto power car. And we spent a lot of time between our two teams sharing things back and forth with them. And his grandson came over in the pit area one day and asked if I could go over and help them take their B&J transmission apart. You're kidding me, right? I mean, I don't even use that in my car. Luckily, I know the Strasburgs well enough. I knew the inside of the thing to be able to take it apart. He had it in the car for 7 years or something and done nothing but change the oil in it because it works so well, he never had to work on it. And as we disassembled it, it actually had the couple of the clutch drums that had worn enough that it wouldn't allow the clutch to compress on, but he didn't know how to take it apart. And he didn't want to come over and ask the question. Actually, he was busy thrashing on the engines, as everybody knew. He never quit working on his car. So he sends his grandson over to grab me, thinking that I'd be able to help him. And jumped right in and helped him get the thing put back together, and they were able to actually set the class record that we were both running against at the time. And I've had some great experiences with the rest of his family afterwards as well. When we actually bumped that record again 2 years later with our car, and his son Rick was the first one that met me at the end of the track. So that's the kind of thing that happens in this business.
Steve, I know you've had some experiences with that as well, and maybe even one or two with Tom. Do you want to talk about that a bit?
Yeah, we, actually about parts, Seth Hammond has a Lakester, and we had just developed the 7-speed. We had a couple of them in the trailer, so we had spares, and we always kept the 5-speed just in case. So Seth comes over, and his 5-speed's annihilated. It's junk. They're not, and we have a lot of parts. I said, man, we don't have enough parts to fix that. So George says, hey, just give him the 5-speed that's in the trailer. And it was the good one. It was the first class 5-speed. So he said, all right, here you go, take it, go run. So he ran, and he calls me on the phone. He says, hey, I want to bring this 5-speed back. I'm like, what 5-speed? He says, well, George lent me a 5-speed. I said, I don't think George lent it to you. I think he gave it to you. He said, you're kidding me. I said, no, I'm not kidding you. That's the way George is. You needed a 5-speed, and it was not going to go back in our car. And Seth, in the meantime, now when we were building the new car, would stop by the shop and says, is there anything I can do for you? I said, as a matter of fact, there is. We got all these molds from the old body, from the Streamliner body, that were kept in storage for, 7 or 8 years. And there is a huge container load of them. So they got them to the shop, we dropped them off, I went and bought a container, I said, I'll tell you what I need. You want a crane service? I need a crane tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Because them molds are going to North Carolina tomorrow. Because we're running out of time. It's December or January, and we're running out of time right now. So he got it there. The crane was there at 1 o'clock. They picked it up. And I said, you can send me a bill for the crane? He says, not a chance in hell.
You don't want to jump in about the kids. Wayne, are you still out there, Mr. Jessel, somewhere back there? All right. He's the patron saint of youth right now, because when the salt comes back, hopefully here in 2016, he's going to be putting a 16, or she might be 17 by that time, young lady into his pickup truck with that honking great NASCAR engine in the thing. She will probably be, if we get the salt and if we get the weather, probably the first opportunity, the youngest girl to join the 200-mile-an-hour club. Now you're going to understand something here, ladies and gentlemen. This girl, the way she came into LandSpeed racing, I'm going to tell you the story because you're going to love it. Her mother was belting her father into the race car as he was going to take a pass in the family race car. And she says, oh, by the way, as he's putting his visor down, I'm pregnant. He says, I want to talk to you about that, but I'll be back in a minute. And he makes the pass. She was born. She came out in the car seat. There are pictures of this young gal on the little tiny plastic three-wheeler, what do you call those things? The big wheels type of thing, and all of the other ones. She has every year come out and helped Daddy work on the race car. Daddy, I want to drive your race car. I want to drive your race car. Well, she's going to drive Wayne's truck. She also helped Charles Neerberg on his Streamliner. This kid has worked at every single volunteer spot in the sport, around the pit area with the SCTA, and she has essentially earned her way into that seat. So we're going to give her that, I'm not involved with it, I'm just telling the story. But Wayne has stepped up to give her that opportunity because she also helped him. Those are the types of things that happen out there. People are put into the vehicle on a regular basis that may not Somebody that can overtalk me. Huh?
They haven't succeeded yet.
In any event, that's one way to look at it. And the other thing, there was a letter that came in from Ronnie Vesco. She's the third generation. There are many third and fourth generation families that are just now starting. And she starts the letter to Neil Cornsey, the director of the BLM, when my grandfather came to Bonneville in 1949. And she says, and my dad and my Uncle Don, who set the record at 458, that the speed demon hopefully will take away from us this next year coming. She says, and then I came out and I set a record over 300 miles an hour. That's powerful to say something like that. So that's one of the reasons we're going after the BLM to say, do your job, because we need this place.
Thanks, Louise. You know, I know that there's some questions from the audience here, so we can definitely take a few if you guys want to. Yes, in the back there.
Is it on the agenda today to talk about the depletion assault or not?
It is. So we'll get into that in a little bit. What's that?
Let's get it on.
We like to build up to it. Back there.
You mentioned youth in this coming in. What about the students involved?
Anybody want to talk about that?
Oh, green speed?
Well, Greenspeed, Ohio State.
Right. There's a lot of the universities that come out. One of the things that some of you guys might not know, there's a thing going across the U.S. in the educational community called STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. I like to put STEAM instead of STEM because that puts the arts, and that's part of what I do, is the storyteller part of it. But because of that, it's an opportunity for the universities and high schools, and for that matter, the United States Air Force Academy, of which I'm affiliated, where you can say to someone, do your math and do your chemistry and do these hard projects. And it doesn't really resonate. But when you say to someone, would you like to work on a 400-mile-an-hour streamliner? Well, here's the things you have to do. Would you like to kill this person driving this car? No. Well, then here's the things you have to do. All of a sudden, those hard subjects in science, technology, and math, all of it, no, I'll do whatever you want. I'll do it. So it's kind of like, you know, a gal getting ready for her wedding. She will get into that size 4 wedding dress. It's the same thing with the students. And you'll see this enormous amount of energy with these kids. They may not know much about it. And Tom, you have helped us with the Air Force Academy thing. They're total overachievers. So we welcome the schools, whether it be something that is a simple project. There's a group from Washington. Pardon? Granite Falls that came out, and probably my best fun in the world, they had a little diesel-powered car that they had built. The kid just got his 16-year-old driver's license, came out to Bonneville, and their goal was to go 30 miles an hour. Well, they got to that point after all week, and of course there's the big giant semi-truck diesels. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool to put this itty-bitty little car that was built by the students next to this giant semi? So we did it point to point, had the photo session, and these kids, I thought they were going to come out of their skin, because I told the guys from the big semi team, go over and talk to them. This is your chance to inspire them. Well, we didn't want to bother them. You're not going to bother them. You're going to make them really happy. And all of a sudden, for an hour and a half, from what was a 10-minute photograph, became an hour and a half, and there were all kinds of relationships that were put together, and there were kids that were inspired. So the other thing I see out here, and you can get offended if you like, but there's entirely too much gray hair in this audience. And there's not enough kids in this audience.
Yeah.
And all of you with the gray hair ought to be bringing kids with you.
Yep. Let me just add one little statement on that. I've worked as an advisor with both the Ohio State Buckeye Bullet Team and with the BYU Electric Light. And in the BYU case, that particular car, the little blue car that Jim Burkdahl drove, it's had 9 what they call capstone projects written on it. That's a senior engineering effort that they do a portion of that car from conceptual design through fabrication to assembly to actually operating the car. Same thing that you guys do out there. But these are engineering students or marketing students or electrical students that are learning their trade, and they're much better when they come out for that. Plus they like to race when they're done. One little piece of the Ohio State program, if any of you follow the Formula One racing series, there was a little short, dark-haired gal that stood up on the podium and held the Mercedes manufacturer trophy up this year. She is an Ohio State graduate that was aerodynamicist on Buckeye Bullet 2. So tell me that you don't learn something from that. She's on the world stage and she's leading the fleet.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Well, two comments. First of all, we went out there from Fox Valley Tech and ran a car. We brought 6 old guys and 6 young guys. The young guys hated it. They really did. They wanted to go to drag strip on Friday night and see their girlfriends. They did not like Bonneville. We fought all weekend. They did a great job out there. We had Brigham Young University was there. There was a number of schools, and then they brought the kids in school buses, and that was incredible to see all those kids. But what we really got to do, and this is my second comment, we got to reach hundreds and thousands of people. And the way to do that, I think, is to have another movie. Because every time, I have a couple of Indian motorcycles. When I say I have Indian motorcycles, they say, have you ever seen World's Fastest Indian? And thousands of people saw that movie.
Yeah, we need girls of Bonneville, not just boys of Bonneville.
We gotta get somebody turned on there to a movie, do something like a movie about Mickey Thompson or something like that. And then get Francis Ford Coppola to do the movie, get Jay Leno to ask him to do it.
Anything else?
Can I add in real quick?
Yeah.
Louise Ann Noeth from Fox Valley Tech, and the applicant we talked to from Thompson Phone. Anyways, to add to what John just said, we, when we were out there 2 years ago, we had a brief raid delay, and I got all of the scholastic teams together, and we lined the cars up side by side with all the students and their advisors behind them, and really took a very classic photo. And I went back to our college, and I sent it to the president of our college, and she was so taken by it, it became the cover of our student magazine, okay? And they were, at that time, adding to the school referendum pass, and they were going to create a 100-year time capsule. And they sent out suggestions, what should we put in there? And I said, hey, put in the Fox Times, the most recent copy with Bonneville salt flats on the cover, and that went into our 100-year time capsule. And it's funny because at that time, I thought ahead, 100 years from now, hopefully that school is still there, and I wonder if kids 100 years from now will even know what the Bonneville salt flats were or are, and what.
That's my job.
Okay, good. Well, you keep fighting that fight.
Yeah, and for those of you that are educators or are involved with educators out there at any level, I do a presentation on LandSpeed racing that talks to the level of student that we're looking at that I give for free. You got to buy me lunch. So if you'd like to do that, you come see me afterwards, but I'm happy to do that.
So it sounds like we're getting into this area a little bit, and so we can certainly, address that. And wanted to ask Stuart, do you want to tell us a little bit about what's going on there and kind of give us the situation?
Yeah, absolutely. And it'd probably be useful to have a 1-minute little summary of Bonneville and how it started, where we are. And so, as probably everybody knows, it used to be Lake Bonneville and dried up. And so it's a very large expanse of salt. And you've got a railroad track that was built and a highway and now Interstate 80 that dissects at almost equal portions. So below it is the potash mining operation, which it is quite a bit private land. And to the north is where the racing area has been installed. And over a 100-year period, you had quite a bit of harmony for the first 50 years. That potash mining was fine and racing is fine. And then you had the BLM issuing mining leases back in the 60s going into the 70s, and that allowed a transfer of salt from the north to the south to the mining area. And one of the things that we need to understand is the BLM has a mixed mission. And it's not the BLM's fault, it's the government's fault or directive that the BLM is to protect land for recreation, that kind of thing. And the other half of their mission is on behalf of the American public to go ahead and make land available for timber mining, all that other stuff, to bring in revenues to the U.S. Treasury. And so in its infinite wisdom, or not, it went ahead and allowed ditches to be installed on the northern areas where salt brine was effectively transferred to the mining operation. And over decades, we estimate that 50 to 75 million tons of salt were transferred. And it's a real easy concept that you have the waters during the winter want to go ahead and soak up some of the salt, and the winds go from generally west to east and blows the salt water into the ditches, and then it's transferred down to the mining area. So all these decades later, we have finally brought everybody to the table. So we had an important meeting on September 14th where we had BLM representatives and the mining representatives, Intrepid, and the racing community there. And everybody is now holding hands and trying to collaborate to go ahead and deal with Bonneville that it needs restoration. And so what we're doing now is making final recommendations on short-term and long-term solutions that can be pursued. A lot of it is just private, so it would be the racing community with Intrepid to go ahead and transfer more salt brine. Some of it is actually on the BLM land, and so we'll need their approval. And at the state level and in Washington, D.C., we have all the lawmakers who are briefed and ready to go. We just need these recommendations and the BLM saying yes. And if they don't say yes, then we go to the lawmakers, and the lawmakers tell them, you have to say yes, and we'll move forward.
Yeah, I think of it because there'll be a bit of a feeding frenzy. You've been told that for a while for the racing community. All right, so let's give them at least two little separate things. One of the long-term goals, which I know for those of you who have cars and bikes out there, you want to hear about the long term, you want to go next year. There are 10 leases on the north side of the freeway. Those 10 leases account for 3% of the entire potash production of Intrepid Mining. When the general manager of Intrepid Wendover said that at the September 14th meeting, it turned a light on in my head, and I wondered, why would they have 10 leases? Because each lease requires a fee, plus they pay a percentage of whatever they take out in sodium and potassium chloride. So they're essentially almost upside down in these things. Well, the fellow tells me it's because they don't want the competition. If they let go of it, Dan Schechner could be the new mining company at Bonneville. You know, Stuart could take those leases. So they didn't want the competition. So I went to the BLM. There you go. I went to the BLM and I said, look, what does it take to segregate, to withdraw this from mining? And did a little research and found out, in fact, that in the 80s there was a plan for this, but at the time the mining company went, no, 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 we want all the rights to mine as much as we want to Bonneville. We don't care about saving it, we want to make money. That tune has changed now because they've taken a lot of the potash out. Essentially, we have a process, there's a formal request has been made on the state level to what they call segregate those 10 leases from all the other mining in Utah, and then withdraw them from mining altogether, as long as the Intrepid does not say no. They will then sign off, because then they won't have a competition. In the long run, that means that we will effectively stop mining on the north side. How much of a big difference that will make, I don't know, we'll have to see. But that's one of the things that is in play right now, and that started in June and July when we got involved with this. On the short term, there is a variety of things that we're waiting for Mr. Brent Bingham at Bingham Engineering in Salt Lake, who's got a lot of experience on the federal, state, and county level, that is saying, hey, there's things that we can be done with that Saldero Loop and those dikes to where we can actually supercharge the amount of brine going back onto Bonneville. That will start in January. Normally, they took off 180,000 tons, I believe, if my brain remembers correctly. They are planning to put back between 400,000 and 500. That's what Intrepid Wendover told the BLM, and the BLM told me. We've put that out on the websites. If that is the case, ladies and gentlemen, that will be one of the first times you've had that level of return since Riley started in 1997. From 97 to 2001, the salt return made a big difference, because that's when Don Vesco set that 458 record, because he had the 13 miles to go and woe. Because if you knew Donnie, you know that woeing was just as important as going. So that's part of the short term. And there's a variety of other things that Mr. Bingham is doing, but it requires dollar amounts to be put back. It's one thing to say, oh, you should do this. Well, you have to attach a dollar amount to that. And then you have to also take a look at it from the mixed mission that Stuart's talking about. If there's a surface disturbance on Bonneville, the BLM has to weigh in on it, because they are the managers. We are finally, though, having a conversation with all of the stakeholders. At the end of the year, Brent has promised to have the final paperwork with the numbers attached. We will release that sometime in January, and you can take a look at the short and long-term goals. If I missed something? Okay.
Louise, let me add one little clarification to that, just because we got a lot of people here that will go out and talk about this story to the rest of the community. When we talk about supercharged brine, I want to make sure we understand what that means.
Oh, yes.
Because that's not an engine term, for those of you that think about belts and blowers. Brine, when you, in a ripening pond on the south side of I-80, brine is created by putting fresh water out on top of the waste sodium chloride that's there. There's approximately 85 square miles, 5 feet average thick of salt over there. So we're not going to run out of salt to do this process if we can get it to work. Now, when you put water, if I was to fill this with salt right now, it is what we call a saturated solution for the chemists in the group. When it reaches about 28% by weight sodium chloride in the water. You can't pump 28% by weight, because it precipitates out when you move it. And if it precipitates in the pipes that are going under I-80, we have no way to put salt back there. So you have to pump that at a reduced solution, typically about 22%. Well, when you put 22% solution out on top of the salt, it's like putting hot water on top of ice. It sucks the salt right up and reaches the 28%, and then it moves the rest of that salt around. Well, it's picking the salt up off places where we want it to be for a racetrack. So the supercharging thing, and this is actually Brent Bingham's term, and I don't think he understands that we use it for racing as well, and it confuses people. The proposal to fix that is the introduction manifold that's on the north side of I-80 that has a small little berm that goes along. Some of you may have driven on top of that little dirt road behind the Mexican restaurant that has the pipes that go underneath. Those pipes have actually filled up because of the concentration. The salt's precipitated in the bottom of them, and to be able to get the water flow onto the racing surface without dissolving the salt on the track, the proposal is to run the reclamation brine to the east inside the Saldero Loop. We'll now leach the salt up out of the Saldero Loop, that we don't care what we're going to do with it, because nobody races on that side of the dike. We never will. The track alignments don't allow you to get in there, even if the dike were down. And the brine will then flow along the inside of the Saldero dike and be discharged through some gated areas out onto what would be between the 2 and the 3 mile of the international course. And it will come out as saturated brine at 28% onto the track. The second part of that that's real critical, and it involves the withdrawal of the leases and Intrepid sustaining their operation for reclamation only but not mining, is to close off all of the water passages that go back to the south underneath I-80 and use I-80 as a dike to retain all of the brine on the racing surface. Today, if you track that brine, when they pump it out on there, not only is it picking up salt off the short end of the international course, but as the water levels come up, it flows around the corner and under gravity going downhill ends up on the south side under the freeway. And we're losing about 2/3 of the reclamation brine back into the evaporation system.
Yeah.
This is not a good thing. This is
Yeah.
like leaving the oil pan plug out and trying to fill the engine.
Yeah, and Bonneville isn't as flat as you think. There are different elevations, and it undulates, and unfortunately, it goes downhill from north to south, right at the point where you want it to go the other way.
It is surprisingly flat, but down the length of the racetrack, there's about 9 inches of elevation between the 11 mile and the 0 on the International. And going south across the freeway, you have about 3 feet of fall from the north edge to the south edge of the evaporation ponds. That's not very much when you're talking 11, 12 miles, but it is enough for water to move on.
Yeah, thank you. I've got a hand in the back there, sir.
Is there some general reluctance to actually physically move salt back to the salt flats, or are we gonna have to wait for time like it did to deplete?
That's a good question. Let's talk about what it costs to move a ton of salt. And obviously the mineral companies, whether we talk Kaiser, Riley, or Intrepid that we've all been familiar with, you don't see any of them hauling salt mechanically when they're recovering it, because it's much cheaper to put it in a gallon of water and pump the gallon of water and then evaporate the water. That's the most effective way to move large quantities of salt.
Are you saying that the Bureau of Land Mismanagement has decided that they will not do that?
No, we're not. And there may be some mechanical transfer in what we're doing here, but let me point out, with the amount of salt that's been moved to the south side of I-80, this process will not fix itself with nature right now. Okay, no matter how long we leave this, there is not going to be enough water until it gets up above the deck of I-80 to be able to bring that salt back to the north side. It's going to have to happen through a reclamation process. So those of you that want to just sit back and wait, Mother Nature will not repair this track.
No, I'm for physically moving stuff.
Okay, you've seen some examples of the dry salt transfer at the end of the access road. There were nominal 20,000 tons of material set down there 3 years ago. If you were there this summer, you didn't see an ounce of that material left there because the water dissolves it. It's literally like ice in warm water at that point because the salt goes into solution in the water. So if there's water moving, salt will not stay there. Okay, and
This got to be where it is through inaction. It's time for that to be over.
well, it actually got where it was through a lot of very concerted action by the mining interests.
Legal, very legal. That's the other part. So we're working on all of that as well.
And I would jump in that I think we're looking at a couple of years of going ahead and identifying what's going to be done. So Tom walked through the scenario of creating a new infrastructure, of how the salt brine is pumped, better ways of doing it. And once we put that in place, we're also going to be looking at how much salt is pumped. And so we'll be going back to Intrepid and saying, hey, we need to increase this to 1 million tons or more. And at that point, we will be getting the BLM to intervene as well. Some of this might require money. And so we will be turning to the racing community, we'll be turning to the lawmakers, but right now, we're still trying to identify exactly what the recommendations are. And then at that point, we can identify how much money we're gonna need.
We've got a gentleman with his hand up.
I've got a senator who's very interested in helping us on this, out of Wisconsin. There's mentioned that there's going to be a proposal sort of available, probably finished out by January. Can some of this information be sent through the liaisons that you're working with in the federal government to get this information to my senator on a more timely basis than January?
Come and see us after the meeting, because we're already working with legislators behind the scene that already know a lot. Yeah, absolutely. Just come and see us afterwards.
Let me address your politics question just a little bit, because I've had a number of people walk by our booth downstairs that have asked, I'm from Minnesota, I'm from Wisconsin, what good does my senator do? And let's just talk delegations here, because it's both Congress and Senate that are involved in this. And in Utah, we're working with the whole group of them. And in Nevada, we're working very closely. We've got governors of both states that are heavily involved. You asked, does your state representation in DC help you at all? That's what Stuart does for a living, and yes, they do, because all of those people have input to the Department of the Interior and to the BLM. It's primary that we work with the ones in the states where the activities are going on, and you've seen the letters on the Utah Alliance Facebook pages and websites from all of those representatives. They're all behind this thing supporting it, which has not happened in the past. We've never had that kind of support. But don't avoid going to your Florida senator and writing one of those letters. There's form letters on there with the general content. If you want to use those, fine. If you want to write your own, please do it. The more public support we get for this, there was a comment about trying to find 100,000 people that support this. How many hits are on those websites right now, and how many of them have actually written the letter to their representative or their senator or both and expressed their concern? Because eventually the BLM responds to those people.
The BLM is made aware that this is not just
We're taking care of that. Yeah.
Right.
All of these letters are going to Cornsey, to the Secretary of the Interior, to a variety of people. If you go to the website and find that, to address that, the Arfons family. Gee, you might think they have something to do with Bonneville. Well, Tim Arfons happens to live a couple of doors down from the Lieutenant Governor in the state of Ohio. Do you think the state of Ohio has a little stake in Bonneville? Little thing called Firestone Tires in Goodyear? There's going to be a letter forthcoming from Ohio as well as from not only the Arfons family, but the Lieutenant Governor. I'm voting to get the governor as well. But any one of you out there who have connections politically, this is the time to make the call.
This gentleman's actually had his hand up for a little bit.
So, from what I understand about the leases, there is a part in there that there's percentage of the money that's supposed to go towards reclamation.
Correct.
And how do we find out what that dollar, because it's been decades. So I'm guessing there's a pile of money. How do we find out what that pile of money value is?
I can talk to you about that afterwards because it's a long, involved situation. It's not as simple as you might think. It has to do with bonds opposed to a pile of money that's been collecting. Everybody thinks there's a pile of money somewhere. It's not that. There's a series of bonds and warrants that says, I will do this. If I don't do this, I have a bond that says I won't. But I'll talk to you about that. But that's part of what we're talking about when we talk about restoration and reclamation processes, once we get the plan. But that's already been on the table in conversation. But there is no hidden pile somewhere.
Okay, gentleman over here.
I'd like a clarification from Stuart. You're talking about a 2-year planning period prior to any significant action happening?
No,
In terms of moving salt.
No.
And so I'm sort of wondering, that impacts the short time frame. How does that impact the short time frame racing that might occur in the next couple of years of Bonneville?
Quickly, and then I'm going to let him do it. Salt is going to start moving in January.
Yeah, I didn't want to leave a misimpression that we're not doing anything and we're spending the next couple of years doing studies and all that kind of stuff. That is far from the truth. And so we are putting together short-term solutions, and they should be effective. Mother Nature has a part in this as well. So for the last 2 years, you know that it's rained. We're looking at El Nino for this cycle, but we're still optimistic that we are going to have an effective program, and that next July, August, we are going to be racing.
Let me add one comment to that in terms of the short-term part of this plan. The reintroduction dike modification that I described earlier and the Saldero Loop modification are both on Intrepid private property. They do not require BLM concurrence. So Intrepid can effectively go out there and move that material around, do the excavation, change the reintroduction process without the BLM. We're going to find
working on
out.
it.
We're
working on it.
we're in a press
They
to
haven't
test
said
mode
no.
right now. Now, Louise is a little more optimistic about how friendly Intrepid is to us as a recreational user of the salt flats. We're about to find out, because if that moves forward, then we know they're on our side. If it doesn't, then we know we got to get behind them with weapons.
If they do an about face on this lease withdrawal, we will know we have a major enemy. So far, we have a friend.
What would be interesting to know, if you get this information from Intrepid, is what is the balance between the billions of revenue that they've extracted and what's gone back in terms of bonds for restoration? I think everybody here would like to know what that ratio is.
I'd say look into it.
What the ratio went back to the revenue of the federal government.
You can actually find that if you go on their website and pull their annual report and look at it.
Right,
It's
you can do
reported as
that
public
right now.
information.
You can go
Okay,
and do that.
and it's actually a fairly small amount going into the reclamation because that's a fairly profitable company. But they also have a lot of other minerals and a lot of other operations. It's not all Wendover for Intrepid.
Gentleman in front here.
What are the percentage in your minds of short track racing there in 2016?
You like to get six.
Short track?
Do I get to answer that?
Yeah, go.
Short.
Go get him, Tom.
There's a couple ways to approach this. As we talk about the reclamation effort, we would probably be better off as a racing community if we would agree not to race in 16 and pump the entire season, because the evaporation period on the salt flats really is the time that we race on it. That's why it's dry when we race on it. That's the prime time for getting rid of the water that's carrying the salt out there. And if you really want to put a lot of salt out there, you pump brine onto it during the summer. These are not perfected numbers, but they're in the draft that I've been working with Brent Brigham on. If we were to agree to not run the 2016 season right now and run the pumps all summer, there is enough water there to do that, and there's way more than enough salt to do that. I believe in 2017 we'd have 2.5 inches of salt on top of it. Okay? Now, there are a number of short track guys, motorcycles and lower speed cars, that don't need 15 miles of racetrack, or that don't necessarily need real hard surfaces to apply power to, that want to race in 2016. I don't know how this is going to work out as to which direction we go. For me, I vote to take 2016 and advertise that we're not going to run and put brine out there. Some of you don't like that idea because you'd like to go race on a 3-mile racetrack. We had people that would have run on a 1-mile track last year. We did have an Ohio State team that ran on maybe 2.25 miles and broke their car. So we got to think through that, and the details are not all laid out to where you can make the vote right now, but without that, I think you have a very good chance of finding 6 miles of track out there in 2016. If we do the regular thing that we've done all along, the 400,000 tons that Intrepid is informally assigned up to, it will start going out there in January. It'll be evaporated by June, and that will be on top of what we saw out there last year. Can you race on that? Probably. It depends on your vehicle and what you need for track.
When do you think that estimation will be cast in concrete?
June.
Actually, it'll be done well before then, because by default, at the end of the normal pumping season, we will have decided to either keep running the pumps as a community, or we will have shut them off and we're going to race in 2016. So it's not going to go all the way to June. It's probably something that happens in the March, April timeframe.
Yeah. In the red, yes, sir.
Have any of the tests been done of the pure brine versus the salt with binders, of what kind of surface that will actually leave us?
Good slow ball question. I'll answer that for you. The mineral content that comes off the racetrack, if that's 100 pounds of that mineral, what Intrepid is under lease to be able to sell is about 1.4 pounds of potassium chloride, which becomes potash fertilizer, and about 0.8 of a pound of mag chloride. The remainder is sodium chloride waste product to them. It's what we race on. Okay, so the percentages of the mineral content that they're selling are very small to start with. Their economic recovery limits of that 1.4 are only about 0.85. And of the mag chloride, they're about 0.2. So there's less, just over 1% of that 100 pounds that they take off that they actually sell. And a portion of the minerals are still left in it. And if you go over there on top of that 5 feet of salt that's in evaporation pond 5, it's hard and solid just like 1961.
Good racing surface.
So I believe if we can transfer that material onto the race surface, we'll have a track.
I've got basically time for about one more question, maybe two, sir.
Nobody wants to race more than 850,000.
Yeah.
Yes, Rob, we know.
Really, in light of El Nino comment, it
Yeah.
also would change the aspect.
Yes, it will.
Exactly.
You know, there's a good chance
The-
the Congress won't allow any amount to take
What,
advantage of it.
there's an interesting thing when you look at the high rainfalls. One of the limiting factors on brine transfer is how much moisture you can get. Moisture is an enemy to the mining companies because it dilutes their evaporated product. It's a great favor to us because it puts more brine in solution and it's free water that you don't have to pump. We do have to pump it back to the north after it becomes brine. So a wet year for us other than the fact we don't get to race, is a great thing from salt reclamation perspective. And we could potentially double the return there with no more pumping capacity because of the natural rainfall.
You're saying you're willing to wait, even though you'd like to race. I
No.
I'm willing to wait too. Hey, welcome
I-
to the track. I'll tell you this.
That's kind of a personal opinion of mine. We got to get together as a community and discuss that. I don't want to put it out here and make you guys vote, because the whole community's not here. But when you start thinking about that, consider what the future of the sport is and where you're headed with your specific race program. And if you're a 300-mile-an-hour car, you should stay in the garage next year.
I think this is a good cross-section in here, but why don't we just do a show of hands? Yeah. How many folks are in favor of sitting out 1 year with a brighter future in 2017? Who wants to sit out this year? Raise your hand.
To sit out this year, wow.
Sit out.
Sit out. Wow.
Save the salt 2016, go race
Okay.
in 2017.
How many would like to race in 2016? Okay.
Correct. You're absolutely right. I think everybody in here that voted for that is doing it based on the idea that there's a reclamation program that's running WFO for 2016.
First thing we gotta do is,
We're working
Correct.
on that.
And as Steve points out, you gotta put a cork in
gotta plug the hole
in the
first.
bathtub before you start filling it.
Or don't do
So-
anything
So
if you
we've
don't
gotta
plug the hole.
prevent the brine from going back across the freeway. And in my mind, that's a part of this deal. If I have to go out there with my own truck and my own shovels and make the berm in front of those culverts, that'll happen.
We were talking that cement bags don't cost a lot.
And I can haul them.
And Tom can hold it. Let's do one more up here.
The only thing I ask is both racers and build style of cars is, you make that decision fairly early. The reason I say that
Yes.
is the cost for us, a lot of, I'm probably about 50%, I know most of you, we race on the short stuff too.
Okay,
Asphalt,
yep.
dry lakes, stuff like that. We can play there, but you've got to make this decision soon based on data. A lot of us are engineers, I know a lot of you. You got to show us data so we can believe in you. We put you up there to talk with Congress, the Senate, and everything else. We put you up there to do the best. If we're going to sit out 2016, a lot of us, I'm the ones raising hands, we'll do it. But you got to get the stuff there. And you got to tell us early, because we start making plans right now. Hotels,
Yep.
rooms, transportation, new engines, new bodies. Most of these guys would love to spend some time over at A2 and Charlotte and Utah Tunnel and stuff like that. We'd spend that money there, but if we spend the money getting stuff ready to go to the salt, we can't. We gotta look
Right.
at you as a committee and say, you better make that decision real early, or you're
The-
gonna keep them off just as much as you are.
The details of this whole reclamation plan, and it's probably a lot farther along than anybody believes out there right now, because I've been working the draft of that directly with Brent Bingham. We've hesitated to publish that in all of its detail with the drawings and layouts and everything until we have both the BLM and Intrepid bought into it. And I think you all understand, we don't want to throw it out there and then find out that somebody throws a red flag and says, you can't do that. We may have to adjust the plan just a little bit to get both of them agreed, but the intent is to run that and put salt back out there in big quantities over a long period of time. But I think we need to put a heavy layer on there first before we can go use it. You can't prepare a racetrack on that surface today. You cannot, Roy, you pull the drag out there. As soon as the drag breaks the salt surface, which is a quarter of an inch in most cases, you're on the wet mud and the drag truck won't even move. I mean, you've seen the pictures on the front page of the Associated Press of Mayor Mike Crawford standing by the mud track. That was a drag that made one pass out there trying to make a track. There isn't anything there. So when you try to run in 2016, that's what you're racing on.
And we want you to understand that one of the reasons that we're not telling you, it's not that we don't think you can understand. We're going to get one good shot at this with the government and with the BLM, with the legislators, in the congressional level, from the federal, state level. We have got to not antagonize people. The LandSpeed racing community must speak with a unified voice, a reasonable voice. They have been listening to us. They have been working with us. Everything I have asked from the BLM they have given, including the individual leases and the mining plans. I don't want to get into too much detail, but the reality is that they are sitting down, they are talking to us, they are being reasonable. And so far, and I know, Tom, I have a Pollyanna idea about this.
Well,
They
I'll average you out because I don't trust them.
All right, well, that's good. And you see, and that's a good thing, because he will make me think about things I forgot about. But every single day since June, when we got into that fight, when the BLM didn't show up for that program with the Salt Lake Tribune, there has been at least one, if not a half a dozen of us working every single day. One day, maybe it's Tom working, not me, but we have been working since June to do something to affect this change. And we are getting cooperation. Please understand that we are doing that. And we're trying to make two stakeholders, the BLM and the mining company, understand things for the first time in their lives from the racing point of view. Just a position. This is our position. And folks, we have been the recreational users. We are American citizens that are recreational users out at the Bonneville Salt Flats. We have a tribal knowledge. We have seen things that the people at the BLM who have changed seats over and over and over again, the ones that caused this problem are no longer around, but the ones that are here are going to fix it. And the same thing with the mining company. This started with Kaiser. There's been 3 other owners of that place since then. But they recognize that, and we're working together. So just please keep that in mind. We've got one shot. We can't screw this up.
Thanks, Louise. Guys, I hate to do this, and we could definitely sit here for another hour and talk and all that, but I got to get you guys out of here. So I want to thank you all for coming. I know that this is a topic that all of you feel very passionately about, and I know our panelists do as well. So I just want to thank you all. Give our panelists a round of applause for being here.